future generations.
Yeah.
So hi, everybody. I'm Laura Broughton, like that Sahar said. I'm from Biological Sciences, and I thought I'd just show you the course that I'm going to talk about. So I'm not going to go through this, but this is the spring 2023 course that I'm going to be basing my talk on. So I teach general biology, and that means biology 11 and 12, if you know the numbers. The course I'm talking about and the examples I'm going to draw are from a course that I teach online mix. So the lecture is listed as synchronous, the lab is listed as asynchronous. But what I really do is both asynchronous and synchronous for both the lecture and the lab. I'm going to concentrate on some lecture assignments today, but I want to talk about the overall design of the course first. General biology is a foundational class. For a number of different programs, you have to take biology 11 and 12. And if you want to go on in biology, the concepts are in this class you have to know them. It's not one of those courses where you can look things up as you go, or one of those programs. You really have to understand things, almost like memorizing your times tables, right? So the vocabulary, the concepts, the skills that are foundational to the discipline are taught in this particular sequence. And that requires a lot of memorization and retrieval skills. And that means that the students have to repeatedly engage with the course materials. That means I've designed the course to do this, and I'll show you some of the examples of that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm happy to take questions. There's both two different components to it. There's a lecture section and a lab section. In particular, in the laboratory, there's a lot of skills acquisition that goes along here too. So there's foundational skills for the discipline, and in an online environment, that is problematic. During the pandemic, we switched to online, which our department had we didn't allow any online labs before the pandemic. And now we only allow it in a few courses. We're keeping them in the mixed majors because of the fact that we have non-majors in these courses. But what we did is we went to an outside vendor called Labster, which allows us to do simulations. And in some ways, the simulations labs are actually better than in-person labs because we can do a lot more, and we can run a number of them, and we can do a lot more with the scientific method than we really can do in an in-person class, just because of the limitations of in-person work with wet labs and materials and working in groups and all these other things. So there's some advantages to the online environment for the laboratories. I also have them do things like draw. So just like they would draw in an in-person class by looking through a microscope, I have them draw, all the different protists and label them looking at pictures of the slides instead of looking through a microscope. So I have those sorts of things too that are skills acquisition. But the last bit, the one that I'm gonna concentrate on today, is how I can get the students to engage with the material in a personal way. So connecting the concepts they're learning about to their own lives and also to the greater society. So the applications. There's not a lot of room in this class for that because it really is, foundational class with a lot of content. So managing to do that is challenging, and it's the sort of thing that I've developed specialized activities and online assignments to do that I can get away with in an online class that I don't have as much space to do in an in-person class. It's one of the reasons I really like the online environment. And you don't have to read all these. What I've done is I've taken the student learning outcomes from General Biology 1 and General Biology 2 and color coded them for you. So the ones at the top, the light color, those are the concepts and the vocabulary. The ones in the orangey color are the skills, and the ones in the blue color are the connections to themselves and into society, just to show you the overarching kind of distribution of those. And so from my point of view, we basically have three priorities in these classes. The first is the content. These are the foundational vocabulary and concepts. And I tell my students when they start Biology 11, which is the course before the one I'm talking about today, that essentially not only are they learning a new discipline, they're also learning a new language when they take biology, because essentially they're learning 30 to 40 vocabulary words for every single chapter we're working on. And we're working on 1 to 2 chapters a week. So it's really a lot that they have to get through. Our students, as you know, tend not to like to read. They don't want to read the textbook. They don't want to study. They've got very busy lives, and so it doesn't necessarily fit. And so what I do is I force them to. I do weekly quizzes that they can retake as many times as they want in both the lecture and the laboratory. And what that does is it makes them go back to the material. It goes back to the textbook, go back to the PowerPoints, go back to my videos. and re-look at it. So when they don't understand something, they have to go look at it again. And that is the way I overcome that barrier that the students often have, where they don't really want to engage. In order to pass my class, they've got to engage. And I give them the opportunity to fail and repeat. So, and that's where the quizzes come in. So they really are used as this mechanism to do that. I also give them exams. The exams are one time, they're timed, they're coming from larger question pools. Both my quizzes and my exams are set up so that, like, the quiz, if it has 20 questions, it's pulling from a pool of 100. If it's an exam of 50 questions, it's pulling from a pool of 500. So the students get different questions in different orders, and it makes it much harder for them to cheat because of the time, because it's timed and because they're getting different questions than their classmates and everything else. So that is how I handle the content piece. And if you look at the grading breakdown, the majority of the grade is coming from those quizzes and the exams. When it comes to the skills, primarily those are being practiced within the laboratory, and that's the simulations and the drawing activities I mentioned. And so they're practicing things like critical thinking and the scientific method. And even if they're not physically using a microscope, they're still using a simulation of a microscope and a simulation of a pipetter, the types of things that they would use in a laboratory setting. And so again, that's another 15 to 20% of the grade, and that's coming from the skills acquisition. The last piece, getting them to stop, think about the content they're learning and how that connects to themselves and everybody else. This is where the lecture assignments come in. And so 15% of the grade is what I call the lecture assignments. I used to do this primarily through discussion boards. So I can go back to this. This is how, like, the grading works and what things are repeated and what things aren't, if anybody's interested, but it's a little complicated. It's the thing I show my students at the beginning of the semester. So even before the pandemic, when I was teaching this sort of class hybrid, where I had a hybrid class where the lecture was online and the lab was in person, I was using discussion boards. And I really do like discussion boards. My weekly discussion boards, I'll show you an example of one of them that I'm still using, requires them to cite sources. So they're using the they're using information literacy as part of it. They have complex multi-part questions, which is you're encouraged to create in order to reduce plagiarism. The problem is, it used to be really easy to check for plagiarism. If I had a student who their writing didn't match what I expected, all I had to do was copy it, paste it into Google, and check to see if it brought up any websites. That doesn't work anymore. And it doesn't work because they've gotten better at cheating. So instead of them just copying straight from a website, they're using things like Course Hero and Chegg, and nowadays AI. And so that hides the sources. They're either behind firewalls or they're not coming up. They're not coming up in a regular search. And so it's much harder to detect it, and it's a lot more labor intensive on my part. So I feel like I'm not catching everybody who's being dishonest, and I'm spending way more time than I used to. The other piece of it is, I never felt like we got into enough of a depth of the discussions were always very shallow. So even though I had them write about something and talk to each other, it still felt like the first step in a conversation rather than a real conversation. It wasn't the type of stuff you could do in an in-person class. You just didn't get there. And so in the spring, I changed my strategy, and I did it first in my Bio 12 class, the second General Biology 2, and that's the example I'm showing today. I'm still using it in my Bio 12 this semester, and I'm also introduced it into my Bio 11. So I've switched from discussion boards into this new mechanism. And what I'm doing is a mixture of various vehicles, but mostly the blogs. I'm also using a couple discussion boards and a survey so far, and you'll see some of them. I've also switched the design and the intent. So I'm still trying to get them to think about how things connect to themselves and in society. But I'm less concerned about making them go find information and cite it properly. I'm much more interested in them thinking about what they already know and trying to integrate that with other things we've discussed. And so I'm using affective prompts much more commonly. And I'm also, I've decided to use one or two large concepts from week to week to connect the material. So even though we might be talking about genetics one week and evolution the next week and ecology several weeks later, I can still pick out a concept that you will find in all three. And so, for example, in this particular class, the two major ones are genetic variation. What is it and why is it important? and the other one is socially constructed categories. Now, of course, the drawback to this is I can no longer have them cite sources, right? I'm not requiring them to. I do tell them if they go find information somewhere else, they should cite it properly, but I'm not being militant about it, right? So unless they've actually obviously got stuff from somewhere else, I don't call them on it. And so this is the breakdown from last semester. There's 2 discussion boards, an introductory one that I use all the time. I still like, they have to cite sort of something. And then a one on genetic traits where they're, and I'll show you that. And then there's a bunch of blogs, and there's a survey. The first 3 of these things, the sex and gender blog and the survey, come out of a project that Shyla was working on with Alex Wolf several years ago. And I adapted what they'd already started. So the way my blogs work is I give them these instructions, and then the questions I'm asking about change every week. So I ask them to talk about their life experience. Sometimes I also give them a video to watch, but sometimes it's just their own life experience. And then they should write 1 to 5 sentences in response to each question. They're not expected to look anything up. They don't have to talk about anything that makes them uncomfortable, and they don't have to read each other, but if they do, to please be sensitive to the fact that people are talking about sensitive issues. And if they look anything up, they've got to cite it. So first example is a sex and gender blog. So the second week of class, we're talking about cell division and how sex determination works. And we start talking about what can go wrong and how there aren't just 2 biological sexes. So we get into some really interesting topics. And so then this blog is about whether or not they feel conscious about gender and sex in their own life, whether they know about the various ways to talk about sex, gender identity, gender expression, and sexual orientation. And they are provided with a couple videos to watch to give them kind of an overview of that. And then the last question is the connection piece. It's, how does what we're studying right now about cell division and animal development impact your understanding of sex? Because that's what we're covering in class. And so how does these 2 things interact? I have a similar one on race. This is the one that came straight out of Shyla's project. And it's about race and ethnicity. For those of you who aren't aware, but there is no such thing as biological race. Race is not a biological concept. There's no evidence for it. It's a social construct, right? So it's not like race isn't a real thing. It's just socially constructed. And so there's no biological basis. And so I introduced that to the students here, and I bring in the concept of genetic variation. This is the first week we're studying genetics. And so this is the first time they get introduced to genetic variation, and we'll continue to hit it as we go through the semester. And so when I'm grading the blog, they're not getting graded for what they say. They're getting graded for answering the questions, right? So as long as they answer the question I asked, they get full credit. And this is where the rubric comes in. The first 5 things here, if you can't read them, it's okay. These are the questions that are being asked for the race one. And then if they answer the question, even if they don't give the answer I like, they still get full credit. The thing about it is, if you look at it, the challenges I'm running into is often the students aren't able, or they're not answering the questions that are affective. So how do you feel about something? What's your confidence level? They're skipping that and then just going straight to the definition, right? So they're not answering the affective piece of it. And that's the thing that especially a student who's in a STEM mindset, to think about how it affects them. That's the piece I'm trying to get them to do because of the metacognitive implications for it. So that's the rubric for that one. And then for discussion boards, I also have a standard kind of thing. There's when things are due. There's 2 tasks, the main one with the questions they're answering for the week on the topic, and then responses to classmates is the second task, and then the rules essentially. And so the 4th week discussion board is about tracing genetics through 3 generations. And so they have to pick a trait that has a genetic, that's hereditary, and then provide evidence that in this one you do have to cite a source, right? So they have to cite the sources for the fact that the trait itself is genetic. And then they trace it through 3 generations. They're given the option of doing it in their own family, in a pet, in a neighbor, or if they don't have anything in their own life, they can pick a classic example. I'm fine with that too. So that's the idea. And then if you notice the second task, in this case, when I'm asking them to respond to each other, I ask them to talk about how this impacts their understanding of genetic variation. So that same thing comes back. this week. And this is the discussion board. So the discussion board, the content is 4 points, but then the citation is a point, and then these various other aspects of the rubric. Again, I have a standard rubric for my discussion boards. The 5th week is a survey, and they watch a video and then they have to answer questions about it. Again, they get full credit for answering the survey. As long as they answered the questions, they get credit, even if they didn't get it right. And then the week 6 is also a blog on genetic diversity. I'm not going to show you any of the rest of the blogs. I have them all here if anybody has questions about them. But what I wanted to show was the results. And do I still have time, Raymond? Another 3 minutes or so?
Yes, you have a few minutes.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I did this in the spring for the first time. And I was concerned at first that the students weren't that it wouldn't go well. But it turns out that the last week of class, I had them do a blog that was just a reflection on the lecture assignments and course reflections, but on everything. And when I asked for them their favorite assignment, it was pretty evenly split. So you got like students, all different types of students liking all different versions of what I was asking them to do each week. And when I got them to tell me whether or not the writing of the blogs was actually helpful for understanding the material of the class, because the whole point is that hopefully they have a better understanding of evolution because they participated in the blog about it, right? If that blog's not helping them, then there's no reason to have them do it. And overwhelmingly, the students said, yeah. So I got, yes, even though I wasn't sure, one of them said, even though at first I couldn't see why it would be helpful, the blogs actually helped me understand the material. And I think the best one is the one on the bottom. It assisted me in consolidating my knowledge, identifying crucial concepts, and connecting disparate ideas. I was urged to synthesize the information and present it in a cohesive and orderly manner. This aided me in gaining a better comprehension of the subject. So the reason I was using them was because I really thought they would help the students learn the material better and do a better job of integrating it into their own understanding of biology. And they were telling me that when I asked them at the end of the semester. So that makes me feel better about including it as part of the class. And the majority of students did them every semester, every week. So I got very good participation in this aspect of the class. The quality of the blog entries varied. I think that's not surprising to most people. You get some students who had difficulty doing the affective questions, the confidence levels, the feelings. And some people had trouble discussing their own experiences. So they did a lot of this is common kind of thing instead of talking about themselves. Last semester, I had more than half of my students were still having difficulty with genetic variation, even though I probably had 6 to 7 blogs on the topic. This semester, same questions, different students are doing much better with genetic variation. So I do think part of it is the student body that you're dealing with at the time. And many students had difficulty expressing their opinions as opposed to facts. So they're having difficulty with that distinction. What's a fact? What's an opinion? Because they would state an opinion and say it was a fact and then not back it up, right? And so that was one of the things we kept running into. So thanks to everybody. If you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to talk about any other aspects as well.
Thank you so much, Laura. This was great. We learned about how we use the blogs and the discussion board effectively to encourage student learning and participation. So this was great. And also you share your rubrics. Awesome. Do we have any questions to Laura?
Just one, I have a question. Laura, who takes, which majors are you generally having in your classes? Because our majors jump right to either 21 or 23, 24. So who's taking 11, 12?
So 11, 12 is mixed majors. It's only going to be around another couple years. It's going to be gone in like 2 years. But right now, it's anybody who's a general education person. So we get a lot of criminal justice folks and stuff like that, so non-majors, and anybody who's a STEM major. So people are going on in science, AS sciences, AS biotechnology. Actually, no, biotechnology just shifted to 120, 121. So we just shifted to the new ones. But until recently, it was all over the STEM stuff. But we've moved them. They're now in the 120, 121, which is the major sequence, which we just started teaching.
I'm asking because the material that I cover in my human sexuality class is very much like what you just described with gender and stuff like that. And I like when students hear essentially the same message in two different places, it's like, oh, that must be true.
You'll love it. I did a public health one for my bio 11s in week 6. So the blog for bio week 6, I had them watch a little introduction to public health and crash course and then do a blog on that.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome, awesome. It's slightly interdisciplinary work, I guess. A introduction to the interdisciplinary projects. I think I like it because I'm all into interdisciplinary work on campus and overall in teaching. Carlos, then Shaila.
No, it's not a question, it's a comment. It makes me think, after all the work you put into this, Laura, they really get to walk through the content, especially when you talk about genetic diversity, right? That they had a discussion, you go over the content, back and forth a lot. So I wonder for me or for other teachers like me that we just browse through that during a week or two because the syllabus is so tight, so we don't have time to really go into application. Probably are getting nothing out of this. If you spend so much time, right, in discussing, integrating this with society, applications, and still they kind of are, not very clear about that, we had to think about content, right? We are kind of giving too much content for nothing because we go through here, they write in the exam, and then it goes away.
That's why we
Right,
did
so-
21-21. So 121-21 are running differently precisely because of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Shaila.
Hi, Laura had just a small question. Wonderful presentation, as always. Very, very inspiring. Your discussion board, you're the queen of discussion boards. I don't know anybody else who does it as well as you do. I have a question. Do you think perhaps subtly your directions or guidelines this semester might have been different from last semester, that you're getting better results? No? Okay.
Nope, they've been written exactly the same way. I've changed one question and I was in blog 6. So yeah, no, I haven't changed the introduction to it or anything else. It's just a different group of students, although I'm getting less participation this semester. So I've got the class as a whole is doing better with genetic variation, but fewer of them are just participating in the blog.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much. So this was excellent, Laura. Thanks for your participation for the presentations. So Carlos, are you okay? Carlos is next, and floor is yours. Carlos, you have about less than 20 minutes.
Carlos, you're muted.
There we go. Let me see. I want to share. I had 2 screens, so give me just 1 second. I'm setting this up.
As
I
usual.
wasn't ready. Sorry, I wasn't ready. I'm ready. 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 3
Sure.
seconds. There we are.
Here we
So I
are.
guess you see it now. Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right. Just want to make sure you are seeing what you're supposed to see. Yeah, perfect. Okay. All right. So what I want to do, I want to I guess Laura did it way. She gave a perfect introduction to what I'm going to go over. I want to talk. This is sort of like a case study, very brief, simple case study of what I'm doing this semester. So I want to show you what we do in the class. It's also general bio, the class I'm going to be talking about, why we do it, a little bit of theoretical sort of framework for what we do, and then what students say, how it's working, at least so far, right? So let me see. Next slide. There it is. All right. So the class is organized, or the class Zoom, I would say. The class Zoom is organized, it's a traditional lecture, a lecture, I show images, I show a few videos, I talk over the videos, I copy like small sentences, definitions from the textbook. So I repeat that, and then I also rephrase that using, everyday's terminology, so they can, hear different ways. And then they have assignments which actually work as a formative assessment, right? That's the type of formative assessment I give them, which is basically quizzes. I'll show you a few examples in a few minutes, using multiple types of questions. I use also video quizzes where they have a video, the video stops, the question pops up and they answer. And I also use worksheets that I'll show you in a few minutes too. As a form of summative assessment, I basically use the same. I just change, I change the wording, I change the maybe a little bit of context, but it's the same type of questions. I have quiz style questions, video quiz style questions, and worksheet style questions. So they are, they have a practice area or time for them, and then what they've been practicing in the formative assessment, they apply it or they show it. They show it to me in the summative assessment. So I know we have a diverse audience probably. So just in case, the formative assessment basically is the idea of formative assessment in terms that assessment for learning is the opportunity to learn, right? This happened during learning. You probably all know this, but it's opportunity for students to practice and realize how much they know, how much they do not know, right? Sort of an area for self-reflection to see what they are going through. And also for me, it works to monitor their learning, right? I can see, for example, Blackboard has a feature that you have an item analysis. So I can see when I give a quiz, which is the most common misunderstanding or mistake, and then I can bring it back the next class and review it with them together, right? So again, it's an opportunity for them to practice, for me to see what my mistakes were when I was going over the topic, and what their misunderstandings are, I can review it together. So basically, this is an area for adjusting learning from their side and teaching from my side. And then it comes the summative assessment, which is the assessment of learning, right? So this happened after learning. Basically, these are the exams. And this is for me to know how much they know. And usually this has more weight. It's what we traditionally call high stakes activities. And usually this is when it's too late for adjustment, right? You have a grade, that's it, at least for that chunk of content from the course. So very briefly, I show you what I'm talking about when I talk about quizzes. I use a diversity of quizzes. I use quizzes where they have or questions in the quizzes where they have to sort different steps in a process, or they have to match definitions with the terminology or different things that you can match. There's true-false questions. There's also questions where they had to fill in blank or blanks. This is mostly for terminology. There's questions they had to identify something on the slides or some images. And there's also questions that I use that have multiple statements, and this is the most complicated maybe for them, multiple statements, and they had to say which one is correct, which one is not, based on something, for example, an image, right? So it's a wide variety of ways how they can practice, I would say. And again, the same topic, the same content, I may show it using different type of questions, right? So the question you see there with that illustration about that, which is electrophoresis, is a experiment we do in the lab. I can also give other type of questions for the same content. So basically, I use different type of questions. I order the questions and the answers at random. The questions are driven from a pool. So for every content or concept or term, I have a couple of questions. So, they get sort of a random selection of questions for the exams, not for the quizzes. In the quizzes, everybody they do all the same. I give exams time, and for the synchronous exams, they're all supposed to take it at the same time. They are together. So very quickly, a video quiz is basically a quiz where at some points a window pops up and it asks a question about the quiz. And they really like this one. The nice thing about this one is that you can, because it's referred to what they are watching, there's no way for them to search for this in the internet, right? They cannot rely on ChatGPT or Google, although they can call a friend and ask, but well, nothing is perfect. So that's one type of question, and then one type of assignment, and the last one are the worksheets. In this case, they are exposed to different. Let me see if I can get this to work. They're exposed to different types of activities. So this is what the student did. So I just give a blank worksheet. They had to make drawings, right? Or they had to just complete. This is not working. Or they had to complete. Show the work on a particular area that we're covering, or they had to write, very short, with a sentence is enough to show how much they got from the content, or they had to look at images and just write, okay, this is right, this is wrong. There's a diversity of activities they do in the worksheets. So why all this? Why we do all these different things in the class? And I guess, well, there's many answers. I tried to make it simple. There's been a lot written about, how the brain works, how learning works. I just picked this one because I like it. But this is a principle that basically says that goal-directed practice coupled with targeted feedback enhances the quality of students' learning. So the idea is, again, they have lots of a variety of ways to practice. And as I check that, again, I see the most common misunderstandings, and I bring it back, I provide feedback to everyone, and we can kind of, go back and forth and repeat the same content over and over in different ways. And also what I try to do by doing all different approaches is I try to use some of the universal design learning approaches. This is a framework of learning based on how the brain works, basically, right? So the idea is to provide multiple means of engagement. We don't all have the same motivation, right? For what drive us to do something. So the idea is to present to them the options. Well, it's not options, but at least a diversity of ways, which are videos, or something where they had to make sketches, or something where they had to write, or just questions in the quiz. I also try to provide multiple means of representation. So this is mostly not for the assignments, but for the class itself. So I mix and match, talking over videos, just explaining things, using illustrations. I use illustrations or images a lot. And I also try to provide multiple means of expression, which basically translates into different exercises or assessments that they can express, or they can show how much they know in different ways. So this is overly simplified, but that's the idea, right? Diversity of multiple means of everything, right? Showing the content for them to get engaged, for them to show how much they know or they don't know. And the last thing I want to show you, maybe I'm going too fast, is that what I do, not always, but when I use something new, I ask students, I try to do it half the way. Actually, this is from last week, how much each one of the components or items or exercises, whatever it is, in the class helped their learning. And this is what is lots of data here, but just look at the three charts on the right. This is showing, let me give it very brief. I use this fancy tool I have, but this is much help, some help, no help for this one, and they didn't use this one at all. So talking about assessment, assignments, this is what we do. And you see, in general, most of them find that useful for their learning, even more than anything else. Actually, well, happily they like the come to lecture. So I feel happy about that. But you see, back to the internet, right? In terms of Google searches, YouTube searches, ChatGPT, textbook, you see, they don't rely that much on outside sources. Maybe the outside, in a way of saying, source is a student with someone else. I guess this is a student working / just copying from someone. It's a variety of things, but the point is that I think, and for what I'm getting from there, is that giving them different options that are also related because the quizzes, the video quizzes and the worksheets are all about the same, right? If we're covering, what does the theory of evolution says, right? Which are the main postulates. I asked that in a regular quiz, in the video quiz, and in the worksheets. So they have, the opportunity for these multiple means of engagements and expression. I think that's all I want to say. I was not reading the chat, sorry. So that's all. I have here some references if you want, or you can send me a message. I send it to you. So that's all. I don't know if you have questions, comments.
Carlos, thank you so much. This was fantastic. And if you, just sharing the data from the results is backing up the overall success of your usage of variety of questions. I think this is phenomenal. I was always very wondered about how to use the video quiz. So I think I should talk to you because that's fantastic. I really loved it. I don't know how to do it, but probably I will learn. Also, you mentioned that you use the universal design for learning. You talked about engagement, representation, action, and expression. I think having these make the learning more meaningful for the entire student population in your class. I think your students are so lucky. We all try to do it, but as I said, you use all the varieties possible in our hands so far. I think that's also a big plus for your students. I think we're going to contact you for a lot of things that you presented today. So
Okay.
thank you so much. This was wonderful. And I was so surprised to see students don't use ChatGPT a lot. So that was,
You see, you know what?
yes,
The
I
thing
noticed
is,
it immediately.
last semester I did in person. So I asked them, right? I don't know when, at some point I asked, because this came up last year, right? So I asked them, you guys, I don't know how it came, but I asked them, and they all look at me as if I was talking a foreign language. And I say, oops, I hope I didn't make you aware of it.
Okay.
So this time is the same. I don't know if they don't, I mean, they probably know, but they haven't used it. Only one student said much helpful in the chart in there. So I'm afraid now that I made them aware that they can use it for the assignments. But for some things doesn't work, for especially for the video quizzes, it doesn't work for the worksheets. It works, but I can see it. Actually, I saw it. I don't know if she used ChatGPT or a textbook, but it's perfect, and it has some things that you notice that it doesn't match with the question, right? And it's not
Yes.
that because
Yes.
the student misinterpret the question, is because it's kind of a little off context. So you can realize about that,
Yes.
right?
And also the way you design the questions will have them use ChatGPT less. So it depends on the question types as well. And I think
Yeah, the ones I had to do drawings or sketches,
Yes.
I mean, well, you could figure, but it's kind of in the diversity, right? Is the advantage. Like I can, like if, for example, some of the worksheets, some of the questions are kind of my control questions because I know they pass each other their answers, right? So when I see two students that I have exactly the same answer, I don't tell them anything for the quiz, right? I just say a broad statement saying, well, you guys, it's good that you work together, but please use your own words because when the time of the exam comes, right, you have to show how much you know. Yeah, basically I make the point that work together, but do your own work.
Yes.
And then for those that I see that they copy and paste, when the exam comes, I put them in separate groups.
Mm-hmm.
So then they still copy, and it's very obvious who cheated from whom. You see, but I'm very transparent because I do tell them, the exam is going to be a mix of things. You're not going to get all the same. So it's kind of finding a balance between giving them practice, freedom, and making clear that freedom doesn't mean copying from someone. It means working together, but not copying. That's not, working together.
Yes. Thank you. So we have questions for you.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Call the names based on the order I see on my screen. Elise is first, Shaila is second, and Maria is third.
Hi, Carlos. Quick question. On your video quizzes, are you using Yuja?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
so it's just Yuja, because it didn't look like Yuja. It looked very nice.
Yeah, it's Yuja. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
I think I'm gonna ask Carlos to have a specific presentation just on the video.
Yes.
That's wonderful. I love it.
It's easy
it has
to do as long as you have a video that's already in the format that Yuja can access. You can't just pop in something from YouTube without doing a conversion. No, it's
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a powerful, very powerful tool, and it's so easy because you don't have to grade it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I like the most. That's what I really, really, it takes time, but it's beautiful. You don't have to grade.
And it's rewarding in the end. Okay. Next is Shaila, then Maria.
Oh, Carlos, that was amazing. It's like, we have these conversations all the time, you and I love what you did, especially your thing about how learning works and how you've taken that philosophy and taken it through your entire design of your course. I mean, I think that's simply marvelous. It's great. And you're really living through this. Your students are living through this. Like Seher said, your students are very lucky. As far as I think the user is great. Yes, please give us a presentation on Yuja, because you told me about Yuja as well. I was using PlayPosit, and Yuja is free through CUNY, so I think we'll go with Yuja. And I have a lot of questions. I'll ask you later.
Okay.
Thank you. Maria, it's your turn now. Did Maria freeze?
Maria, you're frozen.
Hi, can you hear? I'm
Yeah.
frozen. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for your presentation. I just have a clarification question. You said in the quizzes you give to all the students the same quiz. You don't give different versions, or perhaps I misunderstood.
Yes. For the quizzes, I give them all. They all have the same questions. And then for the exam, I use the same. Let's say the same question. I rephrase the question, but for that question, I made two versions. See, so then and I mix that. So then, of course, they can still cheat, but it lowers the chances of cheating, because the wording is slightly different, not tricky, but slightly different. So they, because what they do is they print out everything, right? They print out everything. So when they take the exam, they have the print out, and they just,
Exactly.
they copy.
That's why.
They can still do it, but it's time, and it's not that direct because I mix the order too. So they will have, if they did study all the questions in the quizzes, if they memorize it, then they could cheat pretty well. But that involves already lots of work, right? Because I have I don't know, quizzes are between 15 and 20 questions, and we have maybe one exam includes maybe 6 quizzes, 3 worksheets, 2 videos. So, if they really memorize all that and have all that in a place to cheat, well, they did a very good job. I mean,
My fear is that because my experience says that they cheat. I was making more than 4 versions, and still I didn't use as fancy tools as you did, but definitely the students were cheating. The other thing that I was a bit unhappy is that in your data, thank you very much, in fact, for the data, I see that the students for the textbook, they say no help. I am, especially teaching math, I am kind of worry about this.
Well, but this, I think this has to do maybe with the way how I teach the course. Besides, that they don't use the textbook, because I give everything in the lecture. The slides I made is like a summary on everything, and they can go back there, and they have everything they need is on the slides. See, so and I do tell them that the slides have everything you need. Of course, go to the textbook, go to anything to expand, but so maybe it has to do with the way I do it, besides the background, cultural thing going on that no one reads. But yeah, the textbook is actually, you see, half of the students didn't even use it, right? So I mean, I'm sorry I don't have the numbers, but that's about 50%. Anyway, sorry if I don't want to take more time. I don't know, Shai, Seher, how we are doing with time.
I think we should continue, and if we have more questions, we could always contact Carlos. And I am planning to have a series of workshops for the college just to talk about the programs we use, like specific examples, like the UJA that you just mentioned. So we could talk about how we use those. Thank you so much. Again, if you have any other questions, you could contact me or Carlos or Ray, and then we could just answer your questions. So our next speaker is Natalia Novak from the Math and Computer Science Department. So she's going to also talk about how she designs assignments and exams for her teaching in an online platform. So Natalia, floor is yours.
Hi, everybody. But my talk will be more technical.
Okay.
So just give me a moment. I'll try to share the screen with everybody.
So just before you start, so we have about, because we need to finish by 1:30, so we have about 35 minutes between you and Shaila, including Q&A.
And I should do it fast, like mine is short because it's mostly technical stuff. Everybody can see the slide? Okay.
Yes.
So I will talk about two tools that I used to use. Some of them I'm still using, and Kahoot I'm not using because I'm teaching the asynchronous class and it doesn't work for it. But mostly it's WebWork and Kahoot that I used to have for the homeworks, for the tests, and for the quizzes. So I'll begin with the WebWork. It's a web-based interactive system designed for homeworks and quizzes, mostly for math and science courses. And I gave the website link here if you will be interested. And what we like most about it is that each student gets a question with different numbers, because all the numbers are generated with pseudo-random numbers. The Blackboard is acting a little bit different in this perspective. Here you would see like really, pseudo-random generated numbers from the range that you choose, but really anybody can get to the same question. And that's what we need for our classes. Another good thing about them is that they have a big repository of questions, which we can reuse. I'll say a few words about them further on, but what we did is we decided to develop our own proof-checked questions for the remedial, back then, Math 5 course. Now it's retired and merged with the core requisite courses, 0.5. There was a grant, actually there were two grants, the ongoing work to create the questions for the homeworks, for tests, so that students could practice. We call them even retests. So students take a test, they don't get a good score, so they can come to our tutoring lab and retake it, have another chance at it. And we really like that strategy. That was the entire idea of this. And then from that, some other courses got, a bunch of the questions. Some of our faculty just wrote them from scratch, or maybe used some other colleges' questions and modified them to fit our material. And also the OER textbooks, they do come with a set of WebWork problems. Maybe, different sets, maybe not everything comes with it, but for example, for the class I am doing right now, Math 28, I think the questions were grabbed from OpenStack. I'm not sure, but I think because I'm just using this set, I did not develop my questions, and I'm just, grabbing them from the repository. So for some courses, for some books, they are very well populated. For some, they are not. And sometimes we are able to find similar questions and reprogram them. And sometimes we just stay with what we have. So the WebWork assignments can be created as homeworks. And what I like about them is that they give the feedback to the students right away. So if they work on a question, they submit, their answer, they hit the check button, and then it tells them, no, it's wrong. And you usually choose how many attempts you give. You can give only one attempt, you can give 2 attempts, or you can give unlimited number of attempts. And I know that there are different type of questions there because these are the questions I'm choosing. So for example, there could be multiple choice question, true or false question, not that many, or the question where they need to type in the answer. And what I've found out is that even for the multiple choice questions, I give them unlimited number of attempts, because for me, of course, it's important for students to get the right answer. And the only thing that I have to do is to remind them that guessing will not help them to get a good grade on a test, because in a test, they have only one attempt, right, to submit the answer. But because there are not so many multiple choice questions, I'll let it go. What I also like about it is that when students are working on a question and, for example, they entered the answer 3 times and it's not accepted by the system, I tell them, hit the button, email instructor, send me a question, say, hey, professor, I think that I got this answer right, but the system is not accepting it. And I'm able to access that particular question to see all the answers that the student previously entered. And this gives it, and it's very fast. It's not that I have to, to go somewhere to find the student to see, the quiz or test, whatever they were working on. No, I just click on the link and all I have to do sometimes is just log into the web work, but it will bring me directly to the question. It usually looks like this. So this is a list of the homework assignments. They have the time when they are due, and this is how the question looks like. So here is the question, and this is the button that I'm talking about, email instructor. The students are not given all the buttons. I believe that they only have preview and check, and only email instructor. They cannot see their past answers, if I remember it correctly. And usually they don't need to. But to me, it gives, really fast access to what they were doing. And sometimes I can guess where they went wrong, or sometimes I will tell them, listen, can you send me a picture of the work, and I'll see what's going on there. Sometimes I see a tiny issue in the answer. They forgot to close the parentheses, something else. And then I reply to them, hey, listen, this is how you would type it in. So very convenient. Once again, immediate feedback. So it doesn't take me a week to grade an assignment. And I can give them like 20 questions, 30 questions. I don't do that. But they will be given the feedback right away, right? Hey, you got it right. Move on. So it can also be used for tests or quizzes. They call it quizzes. And they have some other options there, but I mostly use them for tests. It could be printed if I want for the in-person, exam, but I usually use them for online classes. And here, when you create it as a quiz, unfortunately, student has only one attempt. And I'm saying unfortunately because I realized that, sometimes I would actually like to give them 2 opportunities to put in the answer, or maybe 3, because sometimes they have time to check their work, right? And to see, I'm not so sure in this question, but, this limitation, can be avoided. And I will show you how am I doing it this semester. There is no option to prohibit backtracking, which the Blackboard had. And I didn't use it in the Blackboard, although I think maybe I wanted to do it once when cheating was so high. It's kind of when you move on to the next question, you cannot go back. That's it. But, it's fine. It also has an option of multiple tests to be taken during a set period of time. So if it's like training tests, they can do it. And once again, what's good about it is that a new question will be generated with new numbers. Same idea, same method to solve it, but different numbers. And, sometimes they will run into the negative signs, into the square roots and other things that will complicate the process maybe a little bit, but it will be a similar question with the same, strategy to be applied. I wanted to show you, well, maybe if I have time, I will show it, but that like when I'm in the editing mode for the question, you can see in the programming that there are like these coefficients that are picked by random from a given range, maybe with that step and so forth. So like, the real different number being generated for each student. So we do use it a lot for our classes, Math 21, 23, 28, 30, 31, and so forth. I think by now they have a very good set of questions for homeworks and for tests, but I do remember that some time ago, they were not so well developed. So different strategy for me that I use when I do tests for web work for the synchronous class and for the asynchronous class. For the synchronous class, when we meet at the same time and everybody has to be present, I do it as a homework assignment. So I kind of resolve this issue of the student not being able to re-enter their answer like a second time or a third time. So for some questions, I give them the opportunity of two attempts or 3 attempts. And because we're meeting right at this time, they have their camera on. And I forced them to turn it on. They have extra time to work again on a question, right? I allow this. And the way for me to do it is to give it as a homework assignment, but of course it will be with the limited time. So, whatever our class time is, 1 hour, 50 minutes, that's how much time they will have. Now, for the online asynchronous class, I cannot see them in person. I cannot do it as a homework assignment because I usually assign it for a few days. I don't know what students' availability is. Maybe they are working full day, on Monday, and they won't be able to take it. So I usually create it as a quiz, as a test, and then hence they have only 1 attempt on each question. I do limit time only to 1 hour because I force them to submit their work. So once again, it's spread over a few days, 5 days, but the limitation they have is right after they're done with the test, they have to submit their work within 30 minutes. I'm hoping that this limits the students in cheating, right? Because there is a lot of websites and apps that solve math questions, very fast. Some of them do give solutions, but, I'm just hoping that it won't be enough time for them to copy the solution over for the 1 hour test. And then I do threaten them. I do say that no work sent will be only up to 50% of points that they will be given for the test. I do not hold up to this promise, but I do cut off 50%. And I already had 2 tests for my synchronous class. And some students ask me, oh, professor, but I had such a good score on web work, and on the Blackboard, it's saying that I have a much lower score. And so I had a couple of cases who asked me, and I said, yeah, but look, you are asked to submit your work. And a couple of students told me, oh, I didn't read it. I didn't read it, although it was right there, but they rush. So sometimes they indeed don't read the instructions. So the next time they submitted it, but some students still didn't submit it, and those students didn't ask me, didn't email me. I had only 2 tests so far, and I have 2 more. And my hope was that noticing that they have their score reduced will make sure that next time they will submit their work. So there are some things, I will talk about them because what I realized this time is that actually I should ask for the work to be submitted even for the synchronous class, because students sometimes make mistakes, and they are sometimes silly mistakes. And if it's no work submitted, then they're not getting any partial credit there. It's just either you did it correctly or not, right? So if you did a problem correctly, it was 6 points worth, so you're getting 6 points. And if your answer was wrong, was not accepted by the system, you get nothing back. So what I decided to do this time with the synchronous class is to look at their test work. And I was afraid that it will take actually a good amount of time to do that. But what I came to realize is I'm only briefly looking at the questions that were answered correctly at their work. You know, I just see that, oh, yes, it's written. Yes, I see some reasoning there. So it's good. I do take a detailed look at questions with wrong answers. And my findings were like really surprising to me sometimes. Sometimes it's only, you know, okay, I mean, I thought that, yes, it will be, you know, that at some point they made a mistake and then everything went wrong. But usually it was starting from the middle or closer to the end. So not at the very beginning, right? Some people had their answers correctly written on a paper. And then, for example, they switched the signs. So the answer was maybe 1 and -3. But then when they were typing them in, they typed in 3 and -1. Sometimes students were missing parentheses, especially closing ones, because then the web work doesn't know how to interpret it. And then in general, forgetting to use parentheses to enforce the order of operations. I'll show the example. And what I usually end up doing is, and it's quite often, yes, and okay, 2 minutes, is that I give them either partial credit or full credit, because I think that when they mistype, you know, the science, they should get like almost full, not full because it's a mistake, but almost full. Or when they miss the parentheses, they should get the full credit back, especially at the end. So like, you know, there are different types of mistake, but just missing the parentheses, check this example out. So they do have issues typing them in. So this A +5 over B -2 can be typed in like different ways, right? And only the third one will be accepted by the system as correct one, because the system, as I tell them, is very straightforward. It sees the operation and it uses the order of operation. So in the first division will be like 5 divided by B, and that's it. So that are the issues that are there. The web work is not, you know, I think, that up to the level as the Blackboard is, because in the Blackboard you can set up the fields. You know, in web work we can also do it, but not in every question. So web work does give a bunch of tools that help with the answers, but they are not perfect. And some answers are not accepted because of the tool, you know, different kind of questions. And one of the things I like about the web work is that all the homeworks, all the quizzes, I can easily get all the information into the spreadsheet, download it, and then transfer them into my spreadsheet. But I cannot transfer them to the Blackboard. So that's the really, you know, bad thing about it. So that's about the web work. I wanted to talk about the Kahoot, but since I have only a few minutes left, I just say what I use it for.
It's 1:12, so we have 18 minutes left for Shaila. Can we stay a couple more minutes?
No, just 1 minute. I'll, you know, say this and then
no, I'm asking the group, can we stay a little bit past 1:30? If we can, yes, you could go ahead.
Okay, but I'll finish with the slide. So Kahoot I used to do the attendance check and the quick assessment and to keep the students in the classroom when they connect, but only for the online synchronous classes, because they're very fast paced. You know, each question you can set up the timer to be 20 seconds to 4 minutes or maybe even more. And I'm telling students that it can happen anytime. So you have to stay and you have to concentrate on what we are doing, because the quizzes are usually based on the work we are doing in class. So this is like this. So I'll stop here. I won't show any examples, but I just wanted to share how I have been doing the homework tests and, you know, in-class quizzes for my classes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you. I never knew about WebWorks, and I know about Kahoot because my kids, when I was teaching online with them being online in the early days of pandemic, they used to play Kahoot as a class and people were screaming, crying. So I know what it is, but it's a fantastic tool to teach the students. So do we have any questions for Natalia?
Yes, I do have one question.
Yes,
Hi, Natalia.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious as to what's the kind of compliance that you get with having students turn the camera on? I'm just not getting compliance with that in my synchronous classes.
I had issues. And before, when we just started, I didn't know that we cannot require them to do that. So I used to tell them, if you don't turn your camera on, I cannot accept your test because I'm not sure who is behind the screen. And during the test, as they were taking it, I pinged them, please turn your camera on, please turn your camera on. And they were doing it. So they said, oh, I don't want to turn it, on because I have something. And, I asked, well, maybe you can move your computer away, or, it has this blur, or a picture behind, let's prep in advance to make sure that you're not showing anybody behind you, something like that. But they were usually complying.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't agree with CUNY on that policy. I understand why CUNY feels it's necessary for students, but like you said, I've literally had classes where a male answers to a certain, name on my participation list, and then a female answers later. And it's, crazy. But thank you, Natalia. Great presentation.
Thank you.
I leave it as part of class participation. I make it clear if I can see you and I can see you're responding, hey, good enough. No one makes a deal of it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I just have one. Natalia, have you ever talked to Albert Robertson about getting WebWorks connected to Blackboard? Because I see on the WebWorks website, every college that I can think of is using this, even though it's math and it's terrifying for me. But it seems to me, especially since we're going into the new learning management system, if they can get an LTI to connect this, it would make your life so much easier, since I don't think any of those capacities is built into any other general learning management system. So
there is an issue with license. So each license, only one class or something, and it's not easy. So that's what.
So how do you pay for it by yourself?
No, we have it on the server at the BCC, but it's disconnected from Blackboard because it has to be some other type of license, something very complicated, something we have to pay money for. I'm not sure. I think Eva knows actually much more about it because she was they were discussing it. And
so it's sanctioned by CUNY, but they're not paying for. Okay, thank you. That's all I need to know. Thanks.
Maria, you have a question? Very quickly.
No, I just wanted to say that we pay something as a department, and the IT is taking care of it. The IT oversees.
For the server, yes, Marie, for the server, right? But to integrate it into the Blackboard, it has to be something else.
Yeah, for the server, definitely.
We can see if Brightspace's requirements are different.
Okay, thank you. And our last speaker is Shaila, and we can't wait to hear what she's going to say about designing assignments and tests for her online teaching.
Hello, everyone. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to find my... Ooh, what happened to this one? Here it is. Okay, yes. Give me 1 second. I will share. So while I share, I'll start talking because we don't have a lot of time. I don't want to keep you. So I did the oral exam during the pandemic and during any of my online classes. My inspiration for oral exam was that in the past I don't know if you can see my screen. Give me 1 second. I'll just share my slides. Yes.
Yes, we see it.
We see it.
Yeah, okay. Actually, since I don't have a lot of time, I'll talk some. You can go read my paper because it was just published in June. So I just go through my experience with this. Now, before the pandemic, I was always doing the flipped classroom since 2012. And during the flipped classroom, I also, flipped classroom gives you a lot of time to do a lot of things. So I used a lot of essay questions. So I always give essay questions for the exam. I do long essay and multiple choice. So So when you do that, when you do the essay questions, you can test for proficiency, but it's not always possible to test for mastery. So I had a lot of really deep discussions with other faculty, Carlos, Maureen, different people about, am I really testing for mastery? I know they're proficient. So first, when you think about learning, if the students are, if we just give only multiple choice questions, multiple choice questions can be pretty deep. So multiple choice questions can come under familiarity and proficiency. So you can test for proficiency, which is what we all do, test for proficiency. But I've been very intrigued by the elite athletes who train for Olympics. So during, in the last, I would say 30 years or so, there's been a lot of cognitive neuroscience work and study on how elite athletes and elite, musicians and chess players, world-class chess players, how are they trained? They're trained very differently because in the last 30 years, we've seen feats that we've not seen before. And that has to do with mastery learning. And it was proposed by Anders Ericsson, who wrote a book called Peak. It's an amazing book. He is a medical doctor who works with ER doctors. So he was training ER doctors. And so he started studying very closely how elite athletes are trained. So the thing is, the idea that inspired me was that I could turn my classroom, no matter who the students are, into a talent hotbed. Can I do that? That was my question. Can I turn my classroom into a talent hotbed by using mastery learning? So what I did was, so one of the things, my project outcomes were basically students will be able to demonstrate mastery of the fundamentals. The thing that I care about most is fundamentals, because the difference between an elite athlete and a person who's not an elite athlete is that the elite athlete knows their fundamentals and practices their fundamentals every single day. So that's the difference between Michael Jordan and someone else. So because if you look at the quotes by Michael Jordan, everything is about mastery of the fundamentals. It's about fundamentals and practicing the fundamentals. We think fundamentals somehow are easy, but actually fundamentals are very difficult, and they must be trained over and over and over again. So that's the idea behind. So I decided to use all those things. There are a bunch of books that I read. So I put all those ideas together to create a deliberate practice. So this is a loaded term, deliberate practice. Deliberate practice means it's something that Carlos was talking about earlier. It's about how we learn. So if you want to learn, how learning works. Basically, Carlos, what you said was how learning works for mastery. Actually, what you meant was what was there. What I could see between the lines was it's mastery learning. What you were talking about. So you focus on fundamentals. There's a lot of repetition. There is constant feedback, unlimited attempts, and giving the opportunity to learn from mistakes. So this is how top elite athletes train. And I wanted to give my students that opportunity. So during the pandemic, I tried 6 different formative assessments. I still do it. 6 different formative assessments per week, just for lecture. For lab, we have 4 more, but this is just for lecture. So if you look at lecture, the first thing they do is that watch my YouTube video. I have a YouTube channel where I created more than 80 Khan Academy style videos done like with the animation. So I can talk about that another time, but I can show you the videos later. There's no time. So I created these videos, and I didn't use UJ. I wish I'd known, Carlos. On the last day of the pandemic, when they sent us home, I ran around. Carlos was not there. So I ran around and asked all the young faculty, because they're like, hey, you got any apps? So what I got was Play, Pause It, and Quizlet. I'm like, okay, I'm running with it. So I went home and I decided so what you can do with Play Pause It is that you can take your YouTube video, feed it into Play Pause It, and put concept check questions all along. So the students will watch, they'll stop, they'll answer the concept check question, and they'll go through. Unlimited attempts. I believe in unlimited attempts because guess what? The coaches that work with elite athletes believe in unlimited attempts. It's good enough for me. So I do the Play Pause It. Then I believe in basics because fundamentals are important. You know, Michael Jordan said fundamentals are important, so I'm going with that. So I did Quizlet. I created Quizlet quizzes for every single lecture, and the students have unlimited attempts. They keep playing with it. Till today, my students tell me they love Quizlet because they say, Professor, I can do it anywhere, on the in the train, at work. I just play on my phone till I get it. And so they'd use Quizlet. Then what I do is I've written an article before that about how important it is to write by hand and draw by hand, because that's one of the classic skills that we forget. Because when you write, you use touch, pressure, proprioception, which is moving of your joints. You use vision. And if you say it out loud while you're writing, sometimes they're listening to my video and making notes. You say it out loud also when you're writing, then you also have auditory. So you're engaging many parts of the brain at the same time. That's one of the hallmarks of deliberate practice, is that you want to engage as many different parts of your brain as possible. So next one is the Google quiz. This is the kind of questions they would have seen in an in-class, in-person class. The deeper questions that we've all shared in our department. We stole from each other. We looked from each other and looked at each other. I took so many questions from Carlos, from Maureen, from Sahar. So we all pool our questions. Like, oh, this is a good question. Let's use this. So this came from a kind of a grassroots movement for good questions, right? So I've used a lot of those questions and turned those questions into, in the past, I would say, go look at my old exams. Now what I did was I turned every topic into a dig deeper Google quiz that the students do, and then I sort of go over it with a small group. If it's a synchronous class, we all do it together. If it's an asynchronous class, they do it alone, on their own, and then I do have a little recitation session where I do the Google quiz. Whoever wants to come can come. The last one is the weekly check-in. Because it's an asynchronous class, I have the students come in for 10 minutes. 10 minutes per week. They show up anytime. I gave them different timings when they could come. They could come in, and I still do it for my Bio 22 class right now. They come for 5 minutes because it's a much easier class, and they don't require to come every week in Bio 22. In Bio 23, 24, they came once a week, and they had to explain to me that week's concept. And that concept was in the YouTube, and it's also in the sketch notes. So they practice it, and they explain to me, for example, how does high blood sugar or diabetes lead to high blood pressure? So they have to go through the blood osmolarity and all this stuff. They have to do flowcharts with me and explain to me how something happened. So they have 4 or 5 questions they have to practice. So that's the practice for the oral exam. And I work with each individual student, one-on-one. Here is give you an example of how we prepare for an oral exam. Takes a lot of prep. I was getting the guidance from an Australian university that did a whole thing on a guide of an oral exam, like how do you do an oral exam. So I went in and read, and one of the things they said was that you had to do a lot of prep. So you have to prep the students. If they're going to perform, they have to practice in order to perform. So what I did was, mine is completely transparent. My class is completely transparent. Everything that's going to be on the exam, they see in advance. But I curate what I want them to know for the exam. And these are pretty deep questions. For example, they have to teach me how oxygen goes in and comes out. All the 5 goes in, and how carbon dioxide comes out. And they have to walk me through, ventilation, external respiration, transport, internal respiration, cellular respiration, and then going backwards. They have to walk me through these stages. We practice this in small groups. I would have voluntary groups to come in, and we would practice. For example, they explain what is the physiological basis, how does the knife wound to the chest result in a pneumothorax. So they have to tell me that. Or respiratory distress syndrome in premature babies. How does that work? How is breathing regulated? This is a very small example. I have many more questions like this. I didn't want to waste your time. So, but I walked them through these and asked them to walk me through these graphs and say, explain, what does this graph represent? And stuff like that. There are guiding questions. We walk through this. And then urine formation stages, they have to walk me through these stages and tell me what is each stage, what's going on here, where is it going, what's happening. Tubular reabsorption, they have to walk me through this. It's like, what does that little circle mean? What does it mean if it's just going this way? So what is 1, what is 2, what is 3, what is 4? So anyway, so we walk through these questions. They look very complicated, but actually when practiced over and over again, the students actually do absolutely amazing. This is just this is an example of my rubric that I used for the oral exam. So comfort level, ease of explanation, do they, and then the other is completeness, right amount of detail, conceptual understanding, cause and effect relationships are evident, and logical reasoning, they can think on their feet. Sometimes I would just ask them a question. So you talked about unequal stroke volume and you got pulmonary edema. What if you had a patient that had a heart attack recently but ended up with systemic edema? How would that work? So they would have to say, oh no, that would be the opposite, or whatever. So they would have to think on their feet. So I would actually have 1 or 2 questions to ask, see whether they can think on their feet, not too many, because this is not a gotcha exam. This is about teaching them how to actually think like a physiologist. And that requires lots of transparency and lots of practice. Because we are 95%, I just read recently that we are 95% habits. So even those wonderful passes that they do in soccer, they're all practiced. It just happens automatically. So I believe in practice, but the same thing, practice. I give the questions in advance. I believe in teaching to the test, because teaching to this test means deep thinking, deep practice. So actually, there are a lot of people who are questioning the teaching to the test. We hate that offensive term, teaching to the test, but that has to do with standardized tests. I'm not teaching them standardized tests. Here, they are actually telling me what I want them to know. So they practice it. And then I give them feedback, detailed feedback. I actually give them this with the feedback. And this actually helps me to write recommendation letters later on because I give them feedback here. So, and then there's a check called basics check. We practice a lot of the basics check. There's a very, it's a very long process where we actually do basics one day, we practice something else. This is on a voluntary basis. Students come in and practice with me. We record it, and then we share it with the rest of the class. It's amazing how much the students love these recordings, Zoom recordings. I think they're boring, but the students love them. They like hearing their classmates struggle with something and come to the answer. I want to give you a quick example. Once we were discussing how like starvation leads to edema, how cirrhosis of the liver leads to edema, how a bunch of things. And the students were trying to memorize it in the session. And I told them, I don't want you to tell me this in scientific terms. Tell me in English, plain English. How would you explain it to your grandma? This. So, or your brother, or your sister. They said, oh, I would do it in Spanish. I said, okay, do it in Spanish. So all the students who were there, they were all Spanish speakers, all 4 of them who happened to be there. So they all said it in Spanish. Some of them said their Spanish wasn't very good. They laughed at each other, but I had no clue what, some of the things that they were saying. But the good thing is they were able to get out of their mindset of trying to memorize it and saying it out loud in Spanish, because Laura was talking about earlier about context, right? It's all about context. If you understand the context, then you understand why you're learning what you're learning. And then later on, they did say that that's what, they do. So here, what happens with the results? I would say 74% of the students achieved mastery. 16% of the students achieved proficiency. And 10% were below proficiency. I follow the 80-20 or 90-10, mostly 80-20 rule. I try to get 80% of the students. That's my benchmark. If 80% of my students get an 80 and above in any of my classes, I'm fine. And actually, mastery learning produces more A's than not, because of all the work that they do. If you go look at my, grade book, lots of A's, lots of A pluses, lots of A's. So people go, what? Is she just giving these grades away? Oh no, come and watch how we work. It is mastery learning. It is lots of practice. I'm a trained as a competitive ballroom dancer. I train 2 hours a day. I make my students do the same. So they work really, really hard. And I understand the importance. And I also understand how vulnerable you are when you're learning something that's not in your field. Ballroom dancing is very difficult for me because I'm not trained. I'm not a competitively trained dancer. So it's very hard for me. And I understand that vulnerability, that how our students feel when they're learning something brand new. And I understood this about fundamentals because I realized how often I forget the fundamentals in ballroom dancing. I've been told on the first day, 2, 3, turn on after 3, turn after 3. I'm turning on 3 all the time. And it's like she told me that the first day 2 years ago, and I'm still turning on 3, and I'm still working on it to not turn on 3. You know how, and our students, and we say, how come we covered that? How come they don't know it? Well, you forget it because you have to practice it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So you keep practicing, you work on things that don't work. So I think that has taught me something about being vulnerable. So here is the overall students. The students said preparing, and they thought that I think statement 1, they thought that preparing for and taking the oral exam was a powerful learning experience. 90% of them thought that. Taking oral exams helped them to focus on understanding and not just memorizing. That was 86%. 79% of them said over the course of time, they became more comfortable with talking physiology. And 76 said they like this way of testing. Only 76. I mean, the other 24 were like, okay, this is hard. So, but as far as being a profound experience, I have had students, two kinds of students. One kind of student that maybe 3. One is their explanations were so amazing. I would tell them, we give this question, membrane transport, for job interviews. You're hired. So they were so good that you would think, I would hire you. So the other thing is, I tell them that this is one of the questions we use for job interviews. So you're going to explain to me membrane transport, active and passive transport. By the end of it, they do it. I'm like, man, you are good, you're hired. So then another kind of student where I found actually had speech difficulties, and they had serious speech difficulties, and I had to actually make a note and ask the communications department to help, and stuff like that. And the third kind of student was my favorite, that struggled so much because of the language, and also in general had trouble, but by the end knew how to study for an oral exam, and there were tears. And by the end, because they nailed it, they got a 90 or 100 on the final exam, and she's crying, I'm crying, because we're so happy that this happened. So that is the profound change that happens with our students when you feel like you got something. So the oral exams, this is about the format. I just won't go through it. You can read my paper for this. So this is just I don't want to take up too much of your time. So here's the perception, some of the perception, the weekly check-ins, they love. It takes a lot of time, but they love it. The weekly check-ins, they realized that there was more of this pedagogy of care that I try to follow, because we have a new group of students. They are young millennials and Gen Z. They need a lot of care. So we and then Zoom recording sessions they thought was very useful. I thought it was boring, but they thought it was useful. And then they teach it every week. They have to teach something. They love that. They love teaching it to me individually every week. They taught. Sometimes they taught from the laundromat. Sometimes they taught from between their jobs in lunchtime. They would teach me wherever they were. They would jump in and they would do the teaching. And even now they do it for Bio 22. And then they're happy they took the class. I just want to give some practical considerations before we go. preparing for a preparing the guide for an oral exam is extremely important. This is not for the faint-hearted. If you want to do an oral exam, prepare, and then it's going to be an amazing experience. Prepare, even if it's a small one, have a small strategy how to prepare, and then definitely you have to build into your idea practice sessions, recitation, basically sessions with the students, especially if it's asynchronous. In a synchronous class, it's easy because we use our class time for this, so students all come and they're all engaged because they know they have to do this. Even now in synchronous class, I make every single student explain to me how diabetes leads to high blood pressure. Everyone gets a chance. If someone struggles with it and then they get it, you should see the rest of the students in the chat saying, go for it, and they're clapping for each other. They want their peers to do well. The other is scheduling an oral exam. The time commitment can be pretty high, but if it's an asynchronous course, I would say 6 hours over 2 weeks, because some students are ready early. So they say, Professor, I'm ready to take the exam. I'm going to take it now. So they're like, okay, come on, let's take it early. So I could have a whole bunch of students coming in for 3 hours the previous week and then 3 hours the next week. So I always tend to have students who come. And again, even this, I use mastery learning, which is multiple attempts. If a student comes and they're completely freaked out and they're not ready, then I tell them, let's do it another time. Just go study, come back another time, we'll do it. So they come back and they do it. And then the scheduling an oral exam can be a little tricky if it's asynchronous. So I had to use Calendly, the app, which is very expensive. So so I stopped using it. So I take some suggestions from you guys. Any other ways to scheduling? It's a work in progress. Calendly was amazing but expensive. But I use right now I use Google Doc. So students go in and write in what they want to do. So I just want to take you to, do I have time, Sahar, or no?
Not really. I was gonna interrupt you. Sorry about
fine. That's okay. You can go read about this in my paper. I talk about mastery learning as a threshold experience, as is oral exams. Oral exams is a threshold experience. Mastery learning is a threshold experience. So you can, if you're interested, you can read my paper.
Definitely. Thank you. So I'm sorry to interrupt you because
that's
this is 41 and we have to, I mean, if it depends on the participants, would you like to stay for a few more minutes? Because this was very interesting. Okay, maybe you could go ahead for another 2 minutes or so, then we could wrap it up.
I have a question. Is it question time?
Yasmin has her hand up.
I'm very intrigued by sketch notes. How does that work? Where do you get it? How do you teach students to do it?
Okay. So Elise, I use my iPad, and I use my iPad to the notes that I would have given on the board in class. And you could also get them from watching the video and taking notes. You could get the same notes from both. So watching the videos and getting notes might be the same. I did not want them to end up with the wrong notes, just in case they watched the video and got wrong notes, because like Carlos, that is my OER, that is everything. I don't make them go to the textbook. So I give them everything. So it's a completely tailored class, So what they do is that, I write the notes in the iPad, and they are, I can show it to you. I don't know. We don't have time. So I write it on the iPad. I draw pictures and on GoodNotes. And I share them on Blackboard so that students have access to it and they can rewrite the notes if they want to. And then, and that will help them. So that will be kind of like their portfolio to keep the notes.
Because I misunderstood. I thought you were having students create their own sketch notes.
No, they just copy what I've written. They rewrite, they redo the sketch notes. They have to show me the sketch notes that they did copy, they did do it. Now I do sketch notes differently in a face-to-face class. They watch my video and they have to make notes from the video, note-taking. And then they come to class, and when they come in, it's a flipped class. So when they walk in, they take a quiz when we do a little drill, and then they take a quiz. When they're taking the quiz, they all bring the notes to me, and I actually grade their notes for, give them a point, like to say, okay, you made good notes, So yeah.
Interesting. Thank you. Very good.
Last question is from Yasmin, and
Yeah, thanks. Great presentation, Shaila. I actually have to
thank
go,
you,
so I'm
Yasmin.
happy I'm able to squeeze this question in. So in the past couple of semesters, I've had issues with students. I had a student who had a significant speech impediment. I'm so proud of the student because even with that, he spoke up in class. And I've also had a couple of students with anxiety struggles that prevented them from speaking up in class, and they would type in the chat, but they would never go on mic or on camera. So I just wanted to know how you make the accommodations for those students. Thanks, Sharon.
Yeah, very good question, Yasmin, because I actually did have a student who literally was crying during the oral exam. She knew her material, but she was so shy, and she had a lot of problem saying the stuff. So I made those sessions more as a mock oral exam, and I said, this is a mock oral exam. If things go well, we'll be okay, you'll be fine, and then if things, then you can always come back and do it again. So I think that fact about letting them do it again, I think that helped. The fact that she's not held to this moment and like, okay, she must pass this or something like that. Yes, it is still a problem. Yeah, flexibility. So the little flexibility, but I understand exactly what you're saying. There are students with serious problems, and I actually was talking to someone in theater and communications, James Webb, and he actually teaches a class where when I talked to him about it, in fact, we were going to do a learning community if I do an oral exam, an online class, we do a learning community where he would work with the students to teach them how to communicate. So the same students would take both theater, communications, and bio 23, 24, whatever. So yeah.
Okay, I think Maria, I'm sorry, Yasmin's question was the last one. Could you email your question to Shaila, if you don't mind?
No problem. No,
I'm sorry, because it's 1:46 and some of us need to go. So I would love to thank all of you. This was great. I think we created a little learning community among ourselves, and I think we should continue this series next semester as well. We'll be in touch. So our next workshop and the last workshop of the semester is scheduled on December 8th. Again, it's an online format. So we'll have Teresa Smalek, Monique Ishart, Elise again will be with us, David Puglia, Joe Donica, Shaila, and Jordi will be joining to talk about using formative and summative assessment for online teaching versus in-person teaching. So please be on the lookout for the invitation. Ray is going to send out the email and he's going to send a couple of reminders. So make sure you follow that, and we'll see you again, hopefully, on December 8th. Again, thank you so much. This was wonderful. And Ray is going to post the recordings online. We've been talking about it, so he's going to create a YouTube channel, and he's working on it.
If everyone's okay with that. Apparently they don't post videos on our website. There's some rule against that, so the only way to post them is either to give you the files or to post them on YouTube. So if anyone has any objections to that, just let me know. I won't do it right away, but if you don't want this on YouTube, then just tell me.
It's going to be open to the college community, not to outside of.
It'll be a hidden link. Yeah, it's not gonna...
Yes. So, I mean, if you're okay with that, maybe we reach out to you one more time to get your consent, so we could post them when we can. All right. Thank you. Maria, I'm really sorry. Please direct your question.
No. Don't worry.
We need to end the session.